on institutionalizing gender, the way forward. The presenters before me have done justice to the topics each of them handled. And so I won't go into too much details, but how can we ensure that in the various institutions where we work, where we live, we can bring on the gender perspective as a means of bringing in equality in our various spaces. So the outline I want to follow is a simple one. We'll define what institutions are and what they can do. And then we'll simply look at the way forward and how they can utilize the gender disaggregated data or the sex disaggregated data. We'll look at a recommendation and we'll conclude. I plan to share a video or two along the line, 2 short videos to help us understand this perspective better. So institutions, I think we can define them as corporate organizations made up of people in a hierarchy working together to achieve common goals, which could be professional, social, religious, or educational. We've already got so many examples from the previous speakers. So we have the governments, the research institutes, universities and other higher institutions, associations, and religious bodies like our churches and our mosques. So what can institutions do? We saw in one of the presentations the gender neutral continuum or the gender aware continuum. So we can create, institutions can create this awareness along the gender neutral continuum and move towards being gender sensitive, being gender responsive, and also transformative. And this can be achieved if gender equality is promoted in the workplace. We also need institutions that will take out time to determine the gender needs in their individual organizations. What are the gaps? How can those gaps be filled? Then gender mainstreaming should be given high priority in our institutions. So how could this be done? There should be a conscious effort to implement a gender planning and budgeting policy. It has to be documented. It has to follow certain guidelines so that even after the people who started it or managing the institutions have left, whoever comes in after knows that such policy is in place and they have to continue with the goals. So policies for research and development should be gender sensitive. Budgeting should ensure that all gender activities and outputs have resources allocated to them for implementation. So regarding the way forward, we also need to have training activities carried out in these institutions for all the leaders and duty bearers in the institution or organization. Institutions have to create their own gender-sensitive policies. I said it before, to give high priority to mainstreaming. And then capacity building should be provided for both male and female staff. And this should be done intentionally during the planning process so that no one is left behind. So as a matter of policy, employment opportunities and staff development should be gender balanced. So sex disaggregated versus gender disaggregated data. Sex disaggregated data are good, but gender disaggregated data are better as they take into consideration the actual identities of the gender and the issues they have to contend with. So in the institutions, this needs to be the perspective, not just male or female, but what kind of male, a young male, middle-aged, or an elderly one. All these things have to be considered while allocating roles and responsibilities to the various groups. Gender disaggregated data should be the focus in implementing gender transformative policies in our institutions. That's the only way we can have impact. And this will give the right perspectives in decision-making process. So I would like to play this video. I hope it plays out well, but if for any reason it doesn't, I would be glad if someone tells me that we are not making any headway. So I'll stop sharing the screen for a moment so I can get to the video.
Those of us working for peace-building organizations and missions know that the promotion of equality between men and women should form a core part of our business. But where do we start? And how can we guarantee that we have an organization that makes gender equality an obvious part of its mandate?
Please, I would like to know if the audio is heard.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, there. Very, very clear.
Okay, thank you.
Gender mainstreaming means to systematically work with a gender perspective at all levels and allows us to identify inequalities and to adjust our work accordingly.
This way, the needs and experiences of women and men become an integral component of the design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of policies and programs in all political, economical, and social fields, so that both women and men can benefit and inequalities are not perpetuated. This perspective tends to be applied only through separate projects and depends on personal commitments. Based on global best practices and extensive experience of supporting international organizations, FBA rather recommends the activation of an institutional machinery that can support the systematic use of a gender perspective throughout an organization's work. Adopting the concept of bureaucratic gender mainstreaming is one means of reaching this objective.
Why do we talk about bureaucracy? The concept reminds us that gender mainstreaming should ideally be a commitment from the leadership to use the organization's dynamics and daily operations to promote equality between men and women. It is a process of change carried out in small steps, which must be owned and led by the top leadership and middle line managers, supported strategically by gender advisors and focal points, and implemented by all staff. In other words, a functional bureaucracy that will underpin its effective application and make it impossible to avoid. Let's see which are the key components of the concept.
Sustaining gender mainstreaming is best done through a top-down process with strong organizational commitment and leadership accountability. When it comes to gender mainstreaming and the use of a gender perspective, the role of the leadership is to do what they always should do: communicate direction, create an enabling environment, and hold the organization accountable through regular follow-up. This systematization will make sure that gender mainstreaming doesn't remain on the margins. Leaders and managers must be aware of what a gender perspective means, both for the organization's mandate and in terms of their own role in implementing it, and they should make use of the strategic support from the gender advisors.
It is important to have a full-time gender advisor who can guide decision-making and the implementation process. Additionally, this function would support the development of ongoing training programs at all levels of the organization, as well as effective strategies and tools that can be implemented in the organization's daily routines.
As for the gender focal points, generally under the guidance of the gender advisor, we speak of a network of people from all units of the organization that provide regular input to each of the work areas they belong to, so that a gender perspective is applied throughout the organization's work. A person in this role must possess good knowledge of the thematic area he or she belongs to, as well as good communication and collaboration skills to effectively support their colleagues and have a positive impact on the work processes of their team.
All of us in the organization have the responsibility to implement this perspective in our daily tasks. However, we are not expecting everyone in the organization to be a gender equality expert, but rather to systematically ask ourselves a few extra questions as part of our regular tasks to make sure we can identify hidden gender inequalities and then make the necessary adjustments.
Bureaucratic gender mainstreaming, organizational commitment and leadership accountability, strategic support functions. Keep it realistic, make it doable for all staff.
Thank you for watching that video. I'll go back to the slides. So from the video, we can see that organizations have roles to play to mainstream gender. So the leadership should be accountable and committed to gender mainstreaming. Gender advisors should be employed, even if it's one per institution. And then they will work with staff in the various units or departments or sections who will be the focal points. But the responsibility is for every member of staff to be gender aware and ensure that the gender policies of the organization are being implemented. So we take another step, take you to another video, a short one, shorter than the first. Sorry, it's not possible to get that now. So we'll just continue with the presentation. Wrong slide. So the second video talks about the steps that can be taken. Organizations should prepare proposals that would help them and guide the process, document all the activities they want to carry out to enable gender mainstreaming. And then after that, appoint persons that will manage the entire process from the top to the bottom. So everybody is involved, and then creating opportunities for people to be trained at their various units and across the organization. So in conclusion, I would like to say that we all have a responsibility to bring up proposals to the management of our various institutions on the importance of gender mainstreaming. NiWARD and NiWARD can provide necessary technical support and guidance to individuals and institutions who need to develop gender-sensitive, responsive, and transformative management systems. Thank you very much. Nagode. Merci. Obrigado. So now